And welcome back to the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe just maybe you got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast. Whatever you're at, whatever you're doing, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jay, and today we're diving into a conversation that blends leadership, resilience, and the lessons we carry from the workplace into our family lives. Joining me today is Adam Malone. In short, a leadership consultant, keynote speaker, and father of 5. A lot of kids, Adam. It's a lot of kids. Also known as the tenacious operator, Adam's journey from corporate VP to leadership coach is rooted in a passion for helping others thrive, whether they're managing a team at work or navigating the challenges of parenting at home. A little bit longer version, he is a leadership consultant, corporate keynote speaker, and of course, like I said, father of 5. We want to make that known. After a 20-year career in corporate world, 17 years with one company, that's a long time with one company, where he rose from analyst to VP, Adam left in 2024 to pursue his passion for helping high performers become great leaders of resilient teams. His mission is to help leadership teams and mid-level managers identify barriers to performance, enabling their teams to function cohesively and thrive even in high-pressure environments. Adam's philosophy is that most leadership behaviors are simple, but require consistency, especially on the hardest days, transforming quote-unquote soft skills like trust and empathy into real strength that build engagement and inspire challenges. So today he'll share insight on how these principles can help us build stronger families, connect with our kids, and lead with love and purpose in every area of our life. So Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, man. Really excited to have you. So tell us, 17 years in corporate world, and then you just up and left last year.
Bored.
I was bored. That makes sense. So how did you get into doing kind of what you're doing now, though? Why the switch? Why going into this field versus where you were?
Yeah, so I spent a long time leading teams and people, and I love that. But I did feel like I wanted more of my life to be about helping there be more great leaders in the world, because that's really what I believe that we need more of, whether it's our families or our churches, our communities, our country. Like, great leadership and access to it is probably the biggest thing holding us back from higher performance in all those realms. And so I want to dedicate my life to that. And so I need more time to do that. So that's what brings me here.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So how did your experiences in corporate leadership, overall inspire your work? So what was it about working in that world that led you to where you are now? What and how has that influenced? Sorry, I'm getting all tongue twisted here. Your experiences in the corporate leadership world, how have they inspired your work today, and how have those lessons influenced your approach today to parenting?
Parenting. So inspired my approach for parenting or for the business?
Both.
All right. Well, I would say first, in both realms, there's tons of behaviors that you need. They may look just slightly different, but that doesn't mean that they are massively different. So here's an example. If you want to have deep relationships with the people that you work with or with your family, either one, it doesn't matter. You have to be vulnerable. And your relationships in basically every realm of your life are going to be limited by how vulnerable you're willing to be. And so in the workplace, we're often incentivized to not be vulnerable because we don't want to appear weak, or we've been taught for some reason that leaders have all the answers, which I think is totally bupkis. But the same temptation holds true, especially for dads and families. If you believe that you're supposed to be the leader in your family, it can be really difficult to admit when you don't have the right answer, you don't know where to go next. So vulnerability can be hard in both of those realms. But with both your work and your more important work at home, people can tell when you're holding back and when you are not sharing the full depth of who you are. And when you don't share the full depth of who you are, your family's not going to do that either. And right now I have kids that are almost 16 all the way down to 3. And I can tell you for all of those age ranges, that holds true. And if your teenagers are not going to be vulnerable and open with you, if you aren't vulnerable and open with your teenagers, as an example.
Absolutely. That makes sense. So specifically thinking about the workplace, vulnerability can be really hard because it's work, right? Like it's work. I don't want to be vulnerable with the people I work with. I just want to show up. I want to go to work. I want to do my job. That's it. I want to clock in, do what I got to do, and go home. That's as vulnerable as I want to get. So does that limit people in their growth? Does that limit people in those relationships? Does that limit people in their performance? Or how does that vulnerability here impact people in their work?
Yeah. I can think of a couple of ways. One, relationships over the span of your career are going to be the number one determinant of growth, in my opinion. Some people will tell you it's like, how high of a performer are you? But the truth is, even if you were the highest performer at your company, unless you have great relationships, your ceiling's going to be limited. And unless you have great relationships, when you have a bad day, like, you want people to give you some grace. And so being part of being vulnerable at work is instilling in the whole community, the whole culture, that we want one another to share when we have difficulty or we're not performing where we should, because that's how the fabric of the team can help support one another and grow and develop. If we aren't vulnerable, we end up with this really like facade that limits whether or not other people want to engage with us fully, and also limits how much they can help us when we're having those bad days, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Because if we're always putting up a facade and we're always fake with people, then people can essentially smell that and sniff that out, right?
Yeah,
It'd be
for sure.
really hard. And we all have bad days. We all have those bad days.
Exactly. And if you want grace from others, in a way, you have to ask for it. I mean, you have to extend grace to others also, right? There's some laws of reciprocity there. If I want you to treat me with grace when I'm not having my best day, well, Jey, I'm going to need to treat you with grace when you're not having your best day. But if we can both get comfortable acknowledging, like, hey man, I'm kind of crispy. I know I might snap at you today. It's not you. Frankly, I'm having some trouble at home. You know, me and the wife were up all night with a colicky baby. Right? That one little like entrance into like why I'm having a difficult day will help you know, hey, I might actually be a little crispy. I might yell at you or kind of get frustrated more than I would or should. Will you extend me some grace in that? And that also will help you to see that I want you to do the same thing for me on the days that you're like struggling. And if we can both fill in each other's gaps, that way we are all getting to a higher place of performance as a team. And really, that's way more important and way more valuable than any one individual being a super high performer on their own most of the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I see exactly what you mean. And we have to be able to communicate those things, right? First, we have to be aware of ourselves enough to understand that. We have to understand, like, okay, I'm feeling this way today. I'm feeling, as you said, crispy. I like that. It wasn't the air fryer for too long. I was in the air fryer for too long. But I'm feeling this way. And hold on, I'm not shrinking. I promise. The camera's not moving. Just my chair is, the hydraulics are putting me down. You're putting me down right now, Adam. That's what happened.
I'm sorry, man.
I look really small. As anyways, like I was saying there, yeah, some days we don't have it. But I think the most important thing you said there that can also be translated into relationships, and especially with your significant other, is when you can communicate those things and be like, hey, I only got this much today. I only got 60%. I can give 100% of my 60%, but can you cover my 40 kind of thing? And working in that like aspect. I don't remember where I heard that before, but it's just one of those very simple things to communicate. It's like, hey, I only got this much. Can you cover myself? No. Okay, I don't got that much to even cover that. I only got 20. Okay, so now we're missing 20. Let's make a plan to not kill each other today, kind of thing, right? Or how we cover each other. How can we work that together?
Yeah, well, and I mean, this can be true in the workplace or at home. If you can have that really open conversation of, hey, I don't have 100% today. Do you have 100%? Can you loan me some percent? And if you both are saying like, no, man, like there's no way I can do that. Which as a parent, we're going to struggle with that a bunch. If we can have that conversation openly, then that'll help us evaluate like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that thing tonight that we plan to do. Or maybe we need to call in some reinforcements and get a babysitter or ask a mother to come help us or something. But if neither one of us acknowledges that we don't have our like our full capacity and we kind of put up this front, well, like we can't call in reinforcements either, right? So that's not going to help anybody.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to be willing to call in those reinforcements too, right? Like you have to be willing to make that like sacrifice and to ask for that help because nobody can help you, whether it's at work or in your personal life at home. No one can help you if you don't ask, right? No one's just gonna know. Like some people just don't have most people you interact with don't have that intuition to just know Adam's having a bad day. I need to help him out, right? Or even family, that's at work or with family, kind of parallel here, where we can say, hey, Adam, I need to call him up right now because I think he's having a bad day. I could call you up and you're like, no, I'm having a great day. I just had a feeling that you were having a bad day, kind of thing. But it's also important, especially in different leadership positions, whether in the home or in the workplace, to pick up on patterns of people, right? To pick up on their patterns, pick up on their habits or routines and what makes them tick. It's very easy. I've been in management positions, currently in leadership positions. I work with a lot of kids. I work in mental health. So literally my job is patterns, 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 patterns. And so it's really easy to pick up on patterns with people you spend 40 hours a week with, right? Or 40 plus hours a week with at work. And you can tell very quickly if you've been working with them for a while, oh, they're off today. I can just tell. Because maybe they're walking different. Maybe their demeanor's different. Maybe they're hanging their head a little bit lower. Maybe their shoulders a little bit more slouched. Maybe they're a little bit more checked out. Maybe their office is on do not disturb, but they're really never on do not disturb, or you can't hear them laughing down the hall because normally they're cackling and today they're not, kind of thing. I work with cacklers and it's so fun. But yeah, so we have to be aware of those like patterns, right? And then the same with our family, right? We have to be tuned in to pick up on their patterns, whether it's your significant others or your kids. You can tell when they're having an off day just by interacting with them for just a few minutes. It doesn't take long.
Right. And the more deep and authentic your interactions are and your relationship is, the faster you can detect that. Because the more in both of those sides that people aren't putting up a front that you kind of have to look around or dig around that facade. And so that's part of where that joint vulnerability and trust comes in, that the more you trust me, the less facade you'll put up to hide what's actually going on. And the easier it'll be to see that among one another. And as dads and as leaders in the workplace, creating that culture where people feel safe and trusted enough that they can kind of let the barrier down a little bit is really one of the things that we should strive for, because without that, we're always going to be kind of late in figuring out that something's going on when we could have figured out much earlier and helped much faster. And so building that culture of trust really helps enable the way that the team supports each other and the way the family supports each other.
Absolutely. Because then you go from a place to where you're reactive to now you're proactive in what you're doing, right? In that sense, where instead of just reacting all the time, it's very easy to just be in a reactive state all the time. But it also could be very bad if you're just reacting all the time. Because then you never get ahead of anything. You're never actually making progress toward anything. You're constantly chasing your tail. Just like my cat right here. She's always chasing her tail because she's wild. And she always is right here on my desk while I'm recording. She'll make an appearance here later, as long as she's around. But, ow. And then when we're able to go to a proactive state, then we're actually able to prepare and prevent, rather than react and, essentially repair what we've done. So if we can prevent, or what did I say? Prepare and prevent. We kind of have those safeguards in place, right? We have that ability, our kids have the ability, our coworkers have that ability to know, hey, I can talk to, let's just stick with parenting here. I can talk to dad, right? I can go talk to dad, or if we're just friends, right? If we already have that relationship, I know, like, hey, one of my preparation methods, if I know I'm starting to like slip or have a really bad day or really struggle, I can call Adam up and be like, hey, hey man, I'm having a really bad day, versus calling you and saying, Adam, I fucked up. Big difference in those two phone calls. Big difference in those two phone calls, especially if it's coming from a kid saying that, or a conversation with your kid, right? One saying, hey, I'm really struggling. My friends are trying to pressure me and to do these things, and I don't really want to do them because I know it goes against our values and things like that. Like just yesterday, actually, I had a conversation with my second grader, and she's my oldest. And she has this one girl in her class that she's been having issues with. And I guess this girl will say, my daughter's cheating off of her, and then lies about it and just like really mean to her. But she's not mean to like the other girls that in her class. And then she tries to get this one of the other boys in her class to be mean too. And I'm like, well, have you talked to your teacher about it yet? I'm like, I'll help you, but have you talked to her yet? She goes, no. I'm like, okay, well then I can't help you yet. I know she's in second grade. This may sound really harsh,
Yeah.
but it's not. I promise it's not. Where I told her, hey, what I want you to do tomorrow is I want you to ask your teacher if you guys can have a one-on-one together. And in that conversation, I want you to say, hey, I am feeling like this person's really hard to, along the lines of this person's hard to work with. I'm not a cheater. I'm not a liar. That's not who I am, kind of thing. And I don't, try to help her problem solve it and work through the situation like on her own to help it get better before I get better, kind of thing, and actually have a productive conversation versus the typical conversation kids are taught in school to where go and run and tattle or things like that. Obviously, what she's doing hasn't worked, asking her to stop, trying to ignore her, things like that. Now go and take that next step. If it still doesn't stop, then I'll help you. I'll support you in that. Right. So it was just, teaching her to prepare and prevent. Now we're kind of in the reactive state to where, she has to react. How can she react and move forward with that? It just as an example here that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think I like the prepare and prevent both because it's kind of alliterative, but also it's super helpful. I think sometimes what's helpful for us all to remember is there's actually no such thing or there's limited actual prevention. Like in truth, we're always reacting. Sometimes it looks like we're preventing because, I thought about this ahead of time. And so I put some measures in place to make it better if it happened or whatever. But the truth is that's still a reaction, right? It's a reaction to some stimulus that tells us, hey, there could be something that happens down the road that I'm concerned about. I want to do some things that will help me react to that better. So I'm going to react to my stimulus now. And I think sometimes people get in their head that, well, if I'm going to prevent something, I have to be like, I have to have the ability to see the future, basically. And really all you're doing is you are looking at what's happening around you and using the set of information and stimulus you have to say, what could go wrong? And what would I like to have done to maybe help that go better if it goes wrong? And what I like about that conversation you talked about with your daughter was you coached her through how to do that. I know early in my career, I was an analyst and I was having an issue with this other analyst. And I went and told my boss, hey, Anthony's doing XYZ and it's really frustrating. And he had the exact same reaction that you did, which was really annoying at the time, by the way. When he said like, well, have you talked to him? And I was like, well, no. And he said, well, until you talk to him, I can't help you because like you guys have to be adults and like try to work this sort of thing out. The issue was he didn't do what you did and help me know how to have that conversation. He just said, you guys got to go talk about this and figure it out. And I think he thought I knew what he wanted me to do. And the truth was, I didn't really know what he wanted me to do. And then I was kind of embarrassed to admit that because he clearly said it expecting me to just know. And so as leaders and parents, when we find those opportunities that we want those that we care for, whether our children or the people we lead, to go do something, offering just a little bit of coaching to help them through those situations can really enable them to perform so much better, right? Like, hey, you need to go have that conversation with Anthony. And then it could be a simple question. Have you ever had a conversation like that before? Are you comfortable with that?
Mhm.
Right. And if I say, oh yeah, I've done that before, I'm totally comfortable. As a leader, my leader could choose to say like, well, tell me how you do that. I'd love to hear how you would approach that. Right. So that's not a corrective. That's not treating me like I'm dumb. But even though I said I know what I'm doing, which I probably wouldn't know what I was doing, but I might say that. Right. The leader could have still asked for some like, hey, help me know what you're going to do, and then provide some coaching and some guidance. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what I had also coached my daughter doing, because, timing worked out really well, is that I had also coached her to talk to her counselor today because she has counseling today as well. So she's going to be able to, I'm like, hey, that's a great opportunity for you to work with someone you already trust, someone that already knows how you like to react and how you think pretty much. And you can talk to her about that. You can talk to her about how you can handle the other kid, how you can handle yourself, and how you can handle that conversation. Right. And so it's productive. So then she can actually practice it with someone that's not me, because she'll only half listen to me. Right. Maybe half is generous. But yeah, so I'm really excited to see how she handles it and how it turns out, because I think it's a really good opportunity for her. And that's what I told her. I told her, look, going forward, this is going to be how you're going to have to do things. I said, I will talk you through it. I will work with you through it, but I will not step in until you try to handle it first. I come later. You are first. You have to learn to advocate for yourself. You have to learn to speak up for yourself. You have to learn how to have a productive conversation that's not just tattling or anything like that. You have to learn just how to have that conversation, and it starts now, and I want you to have that skill. And she was like fully on board. She was totally zoned into this conversation that we were having, which was amazing. I was like, wow, she's getting it. She's like soaking it all in. Like, I was so proud. So I hope that it really resonates. We'll talk about it this morning after she gets up, but we'll see what happens today. But I'm really excited for it. I'm really excited to see what happens. But let's see here. I wanted to backtrack a little, or not backtrack. We'll move forward a little bit. But we've kind of been touching on these topics of trust and empathy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
As two pretty essential skills here, because you can't have the productive, you can't have the relationships without the trust, and you also have to have the empathy, kind of like you talked about earlier, or the grace as you mentioned, right? If I want it, I got to give it. I think that's very important. But just as they're important in leadership, but just as they are in parenting. So how do these two skills, these soft skills like trust and empathy, play a role in raising resilient kids?
That's a great question. And one thing I would echo is that I think that when I was growing up, I was taught the wrong thing about trust. Meaning, this always happens with your kids. You tell them, hey, you have to build trust. And if we lose trust, you're going to have to build it back. Right. And that just takes time. By the way, that's like a mistake between like being trusted versus being trustworthy, which are kind of different things in some ways.
Yeah.
But in relationships, we need to be trusted, not just trustworthy like we're honest. We need to be trusted like a partner or like an advisor. And as a parent, we need to think about, clearly we need to be trustworthy and honest. I'm not discounting that. But we want our families to view us as a trusted leader, a trusted father, a trusted partner. And what the research shows us is you can't actually establish trust. Like you can't build trust. You can invest in multiple components that lead to trust when we have all of them, but you can't actually say like, oh, I want to go build trust. And then like trust is a thing that you can just get more of. You have to get more of the components. And so the components are really three things. One is empathy, which you already mentioned. The other is authenticity. And then the third is logic. And so empathy is feeling and understanding others' position and valuing it, right? That doesn't mean agreeing with it necessarily, but it does mean valuing it. And so that's when your kid comes to you and says, well, I don't want to do X because I don't like it. You don't say, well, I don't care what you like. I mean, every now and then we have to say that. Like there are situations as parents where we have to say like, hey, this isn't a time for this discussion. This is what we have to do right now, right? But hopefully 80% of the time we can listen. We can acknowledge that a feeling is legitimate, that we understand how someone could have that feeling. And then we say things like, hey, I heard you. I understand where you're coming from and why you don't want to do X. But I need you to understand that here's why we have to do X, right? And that plays into, like, that leads you to a logic place. And there's really two components to the logic. Does someone understand, this is what we usually think of as logic, does someone understand how I made a decision? But then the second aspect of logic is, do they actually believe that I'll do this thing I said I would do, or that I can deliver on that? So you think about that as like a kid. If they say, hey, I don't want to do X, I want to do Y. And as a parent, you say, hey, I understand how you feel that way. You model some empathy, but we're going to have to do this right now. But tomorrow I'm going to buy you a pony, right? And like, that's a joke, but we kind of do that sometimes as parents. We like, it's that, like you're writing checks that your butt can't cash sort of thing. We may be tempted to make promises that are a little grandiose, or even though we want to fulfill them, we know, or maybe our kids know, yeah, dad has said that before and we didn't do that. Like, dad has told me before that he'd take me out to breakfast. And I'm still waiting for that breakfast from 3 years ago. And if we think our kids...
There's still no pony yet. Still waiting on a pony.
Exactly. Everybody wants a pony. But here's an example of that. My kids, at one point, my parents, for Christmas, told our two oldest daughters, that they were going to take them out once a month to do something. And my parents are busy people. They live about an hour away. And they did. In January, they did. And then in February, it got delayed until the end of February, and then it happened in March. And that was it. So for 12 times that they were supposed to do something in the year, they did it twice. And the next year, one of my parents said, hey, we want to do that. And, my kids were kind to my mom and modeled all the behavior that we want them to model. But when we got in the car, they said, hey, like, we're still waiting on Nana to actually do that from last year. So I don't really think that's going to happen. And so, like, if we think that our kids don't keep score on the promises that may be small to us, they do. And so that plays into, are we trusted by our kids and our spouses, of not only are we logical in our thinking, but do we actually follow through and deliver on what we say? And then the third component of that is authenticity, right? So are you getting the full version of me, or are you getting some guarded version that is kind of placed in vulnerability, like we talked about, that doesn't fully share who I am or what I need? And as a result, you always feel like I'm kind of holding back. But you need all three of those things to be a trusted partner at work. But you need all those things to be a trusted partner, father, husband at home as well.
Absolutely. No, and I think you could even add a fourth element here, kind of like you're saying.
Ooh.
The follow through. So like it's a fourth element here. Like it ties into all the other three. Like you have to have empathy, right? You have to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, try to understand the walk that they walk. I actually heard that, kind of unrelated here, but just a thought that I had here that I was talking to my brother about, I think last week or so, is we were talking about the Bible. I don't know how we got on this conversation. My brother and I, we get on tangents and we go way off into the deep end. Talk for hours just about absolute nonsense. It's my favorite time when we get to do that. And somehow we were talking about the Bible, and he's like, well, I'm kind of struggling with like reading the Bible kind of thing. It's like, some of it I just don't get. And I'm like, okay, well, hold on here. What if you switch your mindset? He goes, okay, explain. I'm like, okay, hear me out. And it was kind of a crazy abstract. It's not a crazy abstract idea. I really like this like point of frame or perspective. I'm like, so the Bible was written 2,000 plus years ago. It was written a long time ago. Parts of it were written even longer ago, right? So it wasn't written for people in 2025, right? It was written for people in 2025 BC or, 25 AD, right? It wasn't written for us today. It wasn't written for 2025. We don't have a version for 2025. If it did, I don't want to read what a 2025 Bible would look like. If it was modernized and things like that, just the phrases and words it would say would be out there. There are Gen Z Bibles out there, which are, I don't know if they're a mockery or what, but
yeah, I've looked at those. I just can't do it.
Yeah, same. But it's like, okay, well, you got to put yourself in the perspective of what if, while you're reading this, you try to put yourself in the mindset of what those people were going through at that time. From all the historical context that we have a very limited understanding of what was happening, what things looked like, how people were living, you put yourself in that mindset. He goes, whoa, he's like, I never thought about it that way, because he's like, you're right. It's not written for us. It was written towards them. That's the audience of the book it was meant for. Yes, you can apply it to your daily life and whatnot today, but you can get more of the context and understand more of the things when you take it from that perspective. At least I feel like I've had more success with that. So that's just an example of empathy here. And then, of course, what I really like that you mentioned here when it came to second part of it here.
Logic?
Logic. Yes, logic. you that one's so simple. Be logical, right? You can't just make emotional based decisions. I had something else I wanted to mention here. You mentioned modeling, right? You mentioned modeling along this whole path of, earning trust and gaining trust and building, right? Is you have to model these behaviors for your kids, right? You have to model the behaviors. That's the thing that stuck out here. Logic is logic. There's no arguing logic really. But it has to make sense. The promises you make, how you deliver, things like that. Don't make promises that you can't keep, basically. The podcast I released this week with Eileen, one of the clips I shared was just how don't make promises to your, because she's essentially a help families get their dogs ready for the baby that's coming, right? So she helps you prep your dog for the new baby. It was a really great, insightful conversation. And we had talked about how don't make promises to your dog that you can't keep, right? So don't make a promise to your dog, essentially, that you're going to get up every morning at a certain time and take them for a walk or whatever, things like that. Because if you have a baby, that's going to get thrown off and your dog's going to get disappointed. So they cause some friction in that relationship, right? So don't make promises you keep. Stay along that line. So you have to model the behaviors that you want for potentially your kids and your dog through that logic and be like, okay, dad doesn't overpromise, he doesn't underdeliver. Because I know when dad's going to say something, it's going to make sense, it's going to be simple, it's going to be, he's going to keep it simple, stupid. He's going to kiss it. Just kiss it. And then, authenticity, like we're saying, this all ties in. And then follow through, I think, would be a really important fourth one here. Because kids especially will remember who showed up, when they showed up, and how they showed up, right? And like you said, they keep score. They absolutely keep score. So we have to follow through on the things that we make as promises. We have to model what that follow through looks like. Because that's what we're going to get back as they get older. If we taught them if we modeled behaviors and habits as they were growing up, and we modeled, poor follow through, we're going to ask them, okay, go do this. And then they're going to not follow through that well. And it's going to be like, well, why aren't you following through? It's like, I don't know, I thought I did, kind of thing. And then some of that can be a reflection of the environment, right?
I think there's something really good there to press on. And that is, fathers set the pace of the home in many ways, and the way people respond to one another. So an example of that is, if your wife says, "Hey Jay, will you take out the trash?" and you say, "Yeah, I'll get to it." When there's a break in the game, like if you're a football fan or whatever, right? And then we all know, like, the story. 50% of the time or less, when the break in the game comes, you forget, and so you don't take the trash out, or you realize, I actually got to go to the bathroom. So you go to the bathroom and they're like, oh, the game's back on, and you sit down. Well, like, if you do that enough times, when your kid is now old enough to be asked to take the trash out, their natural response is going to be like, it's okay to delay. Like, I'm not being disobedient. I'm going to do what mom asked me to do, but I am going to delay. Hey, yeah, let me finish this game, or let me do X, or let me do Y. And like, you're modeling for them that behavior, as opposed to when your wife asks you to do something, if you say, sure, honey, I'd love to, and you immediately get up and go do that thing, you're modeling that, like, the natural reaction we should have to a request from one another is immediate action and immediate fulfillment of that request. Now, you should deal with me with grace, and if I, need a minute, you should extend it to me, right? But the more we model, for example, immediate fulfillment of requests that are made from us, the more we're going to build that into our kids, as that's the natural response. When a request is made, I try to fulfill it. That's just what people do. That's what good people do in our house, right? And I've seen a lot of fathers especially mess up in that regard and kind of delay or fulfill requests, like, not quite fully, or even as simple as, when you've got a dirty dish, do you put it in the dishwasher or do you put it on the counter? And your kids will notice which you do. And if you have an expectation that mom's going to put that in the dishwasher for you, they're going to have an expectation that mom puts it in the dishwasher for them. And so to me, that's all part of the behavior that we used the term modeling a minute ago, that, like, modeling behavior is in some ways very simple, but it's integral to how we set the pace and the tone for how the family is going to work and act together.
Yeah, No, I never thought of it that way. How dads really set that pace and set that tone. Because you're 100% right, right? Because it helps create that um, consistency, right? Part of that consistency. How consistent are you going to be in your behaviors, in your habits, in your routines, in what you expect and what you do to show, right? Because probably my favorite saying that could relate to this is monkey see, monkey do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Little monkey see, big monkey do thing. Little monkey do things same way, right? We go back into our monkey brains and we tap into that. But no, it's 100% true, right? Like our kids will 100%. They may not always say what we say, except for my 4-year-old. She will say everything I say, for better or worse.
Oh yeah.
She's spicy. She is. If she wanted to go run a gang, she could go run a gang tomorrow. She's that strong. She's a strong-willed one. She doesn't take no crap. She'll take anything. But I digress there, right? But we have to model that consistency, and as we do that, that's how kind of everything goes, right? We're the head of the family. We're the head of the house, right? And everything kind of trickles down from us, right? Moms are great. Moms have a huge influence, right? But monkey see, monkey do. Who's the biggest monkey in the home?
Right.
I'm the biggest monkey. So the little monkeys are probably going to do what I do most of the time. Like my wife always says. He says my oldest one, he looks like me, doesn't really act like me. My youngest one looks like me a little bit, but 100% without a doubt acts like me. Through and through, in and out. And I'm like, I don't act like that. She's like, maybe you do.
Maybe a little, maybe. Yeah, I think sometimes people could hear this conversation and be like, well, you're underselling the importance of mothers. And I'm not doing that. I don't think you're doing that. But I think part of, there's a reason that families operate best when there's two adults in the home, right? Part of what we're teaching them is how to mature people interact with each other. And just like if I, model delaying taking out the trash or, speaking harshly, well, if my wife models that same sort of behavior, it falls on both sides there, right? But I think sometimes we can undersell the importance of each of us being the best examples of what we can, because like you said, monkey see, a monkey do, and we're going to establish a norm for our family. And if our norm is inconsistency, well, then we'll be consistently inconsistent, right? That's what we'll get out. And our kids will pick up on that sort of thing. And so as we want to build trust with them and become trusted, the more we can feed into each of those layers or legs, the higher our trust kind of account is going to go. And I don't want to argue, but you did what you said about like, hey, logic is straightforward. Like we all get that. I'm surprised you said that because you said you have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. I have not found 3-year-olds to be exceptionally logical myself, but I can tell you, teenagers aren't exceptionally logical either. And so part of what we have to do to be trusted in those scenarios is to remember that at some level, trust is established not as to whether or not I'm being logical, but whether or not I'm perceived as being logical. And so when I'm working with my teenage daughters and they're like, well, that just doesn't make sense. I don't know why you would do it that way. I can say, well, I've got more experience and I'm smarter. And that's why we do it that way. I'm a logical person. Well, first off, that's not very empathetic because it's implying that they're not a logical person. And that's never a good starting point. And so when we think about how to invest in those things, it can be really helpful to probe on why someone thinks we're not being logical and establish, hey, can you help me understand why you don't agree or why you think we should do this a different way? And what you'll often find work and at home is they are logical, but they're starting from either a different set of facts or they're starting from a different experience or knowledge level on how to apply that information. And it goes back. I remember when I was 7 years old and I saw for the first time $100 bill in my dad's wallet. Actually, he had multiple $100 bills in his wallet. And I was convinced that he was rich. I'd never seen that much money. I'd never pondered someone having multiple $100 bills in their wallet before. And I remember, 45 years later, what my dad said, and I understand it so much more now. He's like, no, like, that doesn't mean we're rich. Like, all that money is already spent. It's like, I don't know what that means. Like, what do you mean it's already spent? It's in your wallet. It's not spent. But what I know now as a parent, as a father of 5, if you go look at my grocery budget, you'd be like, oh, wow, you're going to spend a couple $1,000s on groceries this month. And you'd go look and you'd see that money in my bank account and you'd be like, oh, Dad, you're rich. And you're like, we are blessed, but like, we're literally going to eat all of that money in the next 30 days. Well, your kids don't necessarily have that perspective. And so when you're talking about, hey, I want to buy this video game, or they want to go on this trip, or they want to do this thing, their logical perspective is like, I see that you have money, we can spend it on whatever we want. Whereas your perspective is like, oh, no, like, we have to be responsible and have a savings account and like all kinds of things. But like that simple example of just the way a child looks at money and an adult looks at money, the logical approach is so different. And so getting to an increased place of trust is helping them to see that in a way that's really kind, hopefully, and brings them that knowledge earlier than we maybe had it in life, but also kind of brings that empathy in of like, they're not dumb, they're just inexperienced. Like, let's help them get that experience and that knowledge so that our logic can align to a more experienced viewpoint.
Absolutely. No, and you're 100% right. Logic is different for everyone, right? It's different for men. It's especially different for men and for women, right? Thought patterns, how men think versus how women think.
We're not getting into that here, Jay.
No, we don't have to get into all that, but it can be, I've talked about it many times on the podcast before. Think of a warehouse and a very complex spider web. Men are the warehouse, women are the very complex spider web. Just as a basic form. I love getting into that. I've talked about that many times on the podcast, but you're right? The logic looks different. We have to be able to, again, coach them through that logic to help them understand different perspectives, help them see it a different way. And I love what you said. We have to ask them why. Why do you see it that way? Why do you feel like it's not making sense? Right? Like my second grader was showing me the upside down H for doing addition. And I'm like, well, what the heck is the upside down H? She's like, well, you do it this way. I'm like, I don't get that. And she's like, well, that's just how you do it. I'm like, but what if you did it this way as well? Showing her like the way that like we did it where it was just straight up and down for like 3-number, 4-number addition. And then she's like,
I don't know about this H that you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know about it. I still don't understand.
Is it that new math?
It's like, yeah, it's that new public school math. Which is just,
we homeschool, so I don't know.
Yeah. God bless you. I can't wait until the opportunity arises that I can homeschool my kid. I think it's such a better route. If you can do it, if you can figure it out, it's such a better route. But that's a different conversation for a different day here. But yeah, it's that public school math that's just outdated, manual tools, upside down H's now, and for second grade addition, and it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. I'm like, why don't you just go up and down? Like 5 plus 4 is 9. 6 plus 3 is 9. 2 plus 1 is 3. 399 is your answer. She's like, well, that's just not how we're being taught. I'm like, well, that's how I'll teach you. So it's easier for you, so you can do math a little bit quicker and easier for yourself. She's like, well, my teacher won't accept my work, or she won't like that because we're doing it this way. I'm like, well, that way so. I was like, I'm pretty sure I said, I'm like, that way's so dumb. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And she's like, well, it makes sense to me. I'm like, how? And it was just a little back and forth. And then we just we moved on, erased the whiteboard, and just kind of went on with our night. But yeah, math is one of those things that should be universal, should be a universal language, is in a lot of ways, but not isn't at the same time. But math is a totally different conversation. So I guess here, for time's sake here, before we close out, want to do a couple fun questions and then close out?
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. What's one parenting hack or routine that's helped you stay sane while raising 5 kids?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a hack or not, but I think figuring out when you're with your spouse of how you can both get time that you need is super important. Like, as humans, we all need whatever time we need to fill our cup and to take care of ourselves, whether that is you need to be able to read a book quietly in a room, or maybe you need to be able to watch a football game with the guys, or maybe your wife needs to be able to, stroll through Target on her own for 60 minutes one day and not have kids with her. What it is varies, but invest in yourself enough that you have that conversation of, what do you need and how can I help? How can we enable that? And it can really help both partners avoid selfishness and feeling that they aren't getting what they need. And so in our family, like I said, our oldest is almost 16. And when she turned 1, I started taking her grocery shopping on Saturdays. And so that's the tradition in our family. Usually there's breakfast first. And that means that when you turn 1, you graduate and you join the grocery gang. And I take all the kids grocery shopping on Saturday, even still. So
Cool.
I've got the 3-year-old up to the almost 16-year-old, and we're still doing that. But my wife super values that time. And it is really important to her health and well-being that she has that. And so just figure that out for each other and then make it a priority as to how you're going to deliver that and give each other feedback when it's not working. So a couple years ago, that feedback was, as my older 2 girls got bigger, like we started separating in the grocery store, and like they would take a list to the back of the store and I'd take a list with the other littles to the front of the store, and then we'd meet in the middle. We actually got too efficient for my wife's liking and we weren't gone long enough. And so she is actually like, you guys, like this is happening too fast. Like I need 2 good hours. I don't care how you make that happen, but like you got to be gone for 2 hours. And so, but like that little bit of feedback. And so now when it's not 20 degrees outside, like we'll go to a park in the middle or whatever to make sure she gets, all that time that she needs. And I don't know if it's a hack or what, but it's what has worked to keep peace and sanity, in our house.
No, I mean, you got to find what works. And I love that. I think that's great. It's your opportunity to spend some time with all the kids too, right? And for them to also normalize like, hey, dad shop too.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so it's a great example for the girls and for the boys, and just for you guys all spending time together. It'll pour out into so many other areas. Second to last question here. What's a lesson your kids have taught you that's changed the way you approach leadership?
So some more about my family. Our oldest 2 are biological. Our younger 3 are adopted. One of those 3 struggles with autism. And I would say this isn't just about autism. It's really with all 3. They've helped us to see that trauma is real. And I won't get into all that here. If folks want to talk about that, they're welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn or something. I'm really willing to help any parents that need that. But that trauma is real and that shows up in different ways. And I think there's a lot more workplace, either direct workplace trauma or trauma that impacts the workplace than we sometimes like to admit. And some of that can be as simple as when you ask something or you do something and you can tell like you have team members that recoil or immediately have what you view as weird defensive response. Well, lots of that is a sign that they've had some sort of workplace trauma in the past. They've had a leader that didn't trust them or who yelled at them or who changed demands quickly or whatever, can be whatever. But their recoiling or their defensive reaction, that's what kids do when they're having a trauma response. And just kind of extending grace to people more and recognizing that we all deal with a variety of pasts and backgrounds. And if we want to truly welcome someone into our culture and into our team, we need to acknowledge that includes welcoming whatever they've dealt with in the past and hopefully being better for them, but giving them the grace that might impact some aspects of their work or their responsive negatively. And if we want to improve that, we first have to acknowledge that it's not necessarily our fault, but it's our responsibility to help.
No, I love that. I think we've all been through that. I think we've all had some bad bosses. I had a boss once when I worked at Walmart when I was a bit younger. She threatened to hang me from the ceiling. And no joke. But that's Walmart management for you. Any dads that are working at Walmart and you're in a leadership management position at the store level, get out. That's my advice to you. But very last question here before we totally close this thing out. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a young dad, like 18 to 22, who's just starting out on this like life of fatherhood?
I'll give 2 that dovetail. One is enjoy it. And the second is related, and that is know that all the hard things are not permanent. And I didn't get this with our older 2 kids. There's an 8-year gap between our first group and our second group of kids. And what's really been noticeable for me and my wife is that we are much more willing to hold our younger kids a little bit longer or provide affection differently or kind of embrace that they needed us to get up in the middle of the night because they didn't feel good and they wanted someone to rock them. Because one, some of that stuff is really hard. And like you feel like you have other things you need to do. And so it can be hard to kind of be fully present in that moment. But those hard moments, they're not going to last. Like in the middle of getting up every night, you feel like you're never going to stop getting up every night. But 5 kids in, I can tell you, it'll get better. Like, don't worry, it'll get better. And do everything you can to enjoy the fact that, especially when your kids are little, they want to spend time with you no matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter. They want to cook with you. They want to go grocery shopping with you. A Lowe's trip is like going to Disneyland for a little kid. And so just embrace those things and try not to speed through wishing for the future. The future is going to come. Things are going to get easier. But your kids won't ever be that age again. And enjoy every moment that you can.
Man, I could have said it better myself. Well, Adam, thank you so much for sharing your insights on leadership and parenting with us today, with my listeners, my audience. Your ability to connect these two worlds is a powerful reminder that skills we develop at work can make us better fathers and vice versa. To our listeners, if you want to learn more about Adam's work and his approach to leadership, visit thetenaciousoperator.com. That's THE, too much to spell. I'll put it in the show notes and you can find it there. There you'll find resources, insights, and programs to help you lead with resilience and purpose in every aspect of life. Life, not lice. We don't want those, just life. Thank you for tuning into the Young Dad Podcast. Remember, leadership starts at home, and the love and trust we build with our families are the foundations of true success. Until next time, take care, stay connected, and keep leading with love.